Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Kacey Musgraves called Golden Hour. I feel like I've been hearing a lot about what this record could have sounded like for so long that whatever I was going to get here, I'm not sure would ever live up to anybody's expectations. And I'll be the first to admit that's kind of a really crappy thing to say or think going into one of my most anticipated records of this year from one of the heavy hitters in the artistically fascinating country adjacent to the mainstream, especially for an artist whose major label breakthrough I loved so damn much. It was in my top 3 of 2013. But even since seeing Trail a Different Park, it's hard to escape the feeling that a certain amount of complexity and nuance that I was praying would expand in Kacey Musgraves' songwriting, it was increasingly slipping away in favor of lightweight textures and ideas. First there was pageant material, and yes, for as much as I love the title track on that record, it was a sort of overly burnished traditionalist country that as a whole felt a shade too sleepy to really stick with me more deeply. And then when I heard that her next record would be a stab into emo country coming after a remix collaboration with Miguel, I was thoroughly perplexed where Kacey Musgraves' brand of genre experimentation would eventually take her. And then she got married and started co-writing a very love-struck, psychedelic-infused pop country album dabbling in disco with a very different set of her creative team than she had before, and, well, it struck me as the last possible direction that would highlight her strengths as a singer or as a songwriter, especially when, if you know your country history, this is not a subgenre that has gone unexplored, no matter how much some people have said it is. Hell, if you want to take a look at disco-infused country tones, Lydia Loveless was reviving this sound 2 years ago to amazing effect, one of the best country records of that year. But even Kacey Musgraves will admit she's not as challenging or as experimental on those of the fringes of Nashville or Austin these days. And in a sense, that could be fine if the writing was sharp and the compositions held up. Caitlin Smith wasn't reinventing the wheel with Starfire earlier this year, and that's a pop country record that has only gotten better with every single listen. And yet, even despite some very concerning naysayers from the indie set, the critical response has been insanely good across the board. And maybe I'm just worrying over nothing, so alright, what the hell. How is Golden Hour? Alright, here's the thing. I want to try and separate my vast irritation with the critical discourse and coverage surrounding this album, of which I vented about on Twitter earlier this morning, with the content of the record itself, because while I wouldn't quite say that Kacey Musgraves has helped herself all that much here, the album itself, that's a lot more important, and man alive, I wish there was just more worth saying about it. That's the frustrating thing about Golden Hour. I'd argue it's pretty damn good, at moments even great, but it's being propped up by so many people as the best country album of the year by underinformed music journalists, critics, and fans who will at most listen to 5 country albums in a year as a cheap excuse to avoid delving deeper into the genre and then giving them an excuse to crap on the larger audience that listens to country music, which they can likely get away with because of how lightweight and inoffensive and accessible this album is. Whereas for me, who was a little bit deeper and a little more entrenched, again, the record's really pretty, it's got some genuinely great moments, but I have the unfortunate feeling it's not going to stick with me in the same way that Caitlin Smith's Starfire or Courtney Marie Andrews' May Your Kindness Remain will, which are both just as genre-bending or accessible or atmospheric, but they've got a core that resonates so much more with me. So yeah, Golden Hour, it is a pretty great record, but it's not reaching the heights of the best of the year. So let's start off with the elements that I really do genuinely like about this album. Most notably, Kacey Musgraves herself. I've always thought of her brand of expressive charisma has a ton of versatility, and while she doesn't quite have the raw firepower or tremendous range of a lot of her peers, she's been able to work around it thanks to smart multi-tracking, tasteful mix balance, and the sort of clear tone and training that doesn't force notes that don't work. Now on Golden Hour, there are definitely more misty touches of reverb and even some vocoders that show up on songs like Oh What a World, and honestly, I think they're integrated really damn well. Comparisons have been made to Sadie, but the one that really strikes out for me is last year's album Trip with Jhené Aiko. Very similar register and reliance on more subtle cooing, similar languid acoustic foundations with touches of psychedelia, similar gentle synthetic touches that should feel a little bit more obtrusive and yet don't entirely. And as one of the 8 people who absolutely love Trip, I am a natural sell for this sort of presentation. I like a lot of her vocal delivery on this album. And then then when you head into the composition and production, well, I gotta be honest, I really like a lot of these tones as well. And what I find so damn amusing about the I hate country, but I like this crowd is how much this record proves how silly that line of thinking really is. Yes, the big genre blurring step comes in a lot of the renewed focus on languid grooves, and especially in a lot of the smokier production. We will come back to that. But on a foundational level, these songs have much of the same traditional structure in their melodies as what Kacey Musgraves had on Same Trailer Different Park or Pageant Material. And to some extent, it's both a strength and a weakness for her. Because while the tried and true formula does work on the bass level and keeping these songs pretty catchy for what you would expect, given the rest of the arrangements though, you would often find yourself expecting the songs to pivot a little more, show a little more complexity or experimentation. A word that's been used a lot with the record's coverage is psychedelic, but there's surprisingly little of that offbeat weirdness that surrounds a lot of that word. This album's more flower power than acid freakout, but that raises a new problem because it's not like Kacey Musgraves is the first artist to embrace the languid approach or realize that pedal steel can sound ethereal and spacey. And when you start listening for what's really all that distinctive in comparison with the pop country stylings of the late 70s or the early 80s that did embrace some elements of disco or psychedelia, or even making comparison to what Little Big Town has been meandering through in the past couple of years, this record's not that revolutionary. And yet at least Little Big Town brought more of a pulse on albums like The Breaker. In interviews, Kacey Musgraves has stressed that she's made a point to chart the tempos of her materials, the BPMs, to prove that they are on par with mainstream country. But let's get real, when the vocal delivery is so relaxed and everything is cushioned in reverb, and the main groove isn't carrying that tempo in comparison with the acoustic guitar and banjo strumming that's picking up texture more than the main melody, well, your songs will feel a little bit slower. It happens. And that can make some otherwise pretty and textured moments get kind of lost in the larger, kind of listless feel of the album, which might start off pretty strong, building off the textured Steven Wilson-esque acoustic lines to the more defined tones of Lonely Weekend with that more textured percussion and that wonderful whistled touch that I really liked, but it kind of loses momentum going from there. And it doesn't help matters when certain percussion and melodic elements just feel kind of awkwardly blended, like the staccato pianos and the guitars opening up butterflies, or the sticky groove and arranged instrumentation surrounding Velvet Elvis, and that whole blown out guitar solo didn't fit nearly as well as it seems like anybody thought it did, or the on-stiffness of the core of the percussion on Wonder Woman. And even though I don't nearly hate High Horse as much as so many do for the Bee Gees-esque disco touches, especially in the strings and the vocal arrangement, I will say that Lydia Loveless did this first on Heaven 2 years ago, and between the acoustic interplay with the bass, the stunning multi-tracking, and the killer bridge, frankly, she did it a lot better too. Now, again, there are some genuinely great songs here that I really do like. For as much as it is feeling kind of abbreviated, I really dug the pianos on Mother, and Rainbow was a beautiful stripped down closer. It's a really great way to end the album. And between the keening touches of pedal steel, banjo and harmonica on Oh What a World, the Celesta and pedal steel touching off of each other on Love is a Wild Thing, which actually kind of grew on me more than I thought it would, the utterly stunning key shift on the instrumental bridge of Space Cowboy, hell, even though I was really expecting Happy and Sad to take off from the bridge, it still does quite work for me. I like the emotional through line of the song. And yet now we have to talk about the content. And remember how I said how much of this album reminded me of Trip? Well, now we get the big differentiating factor. Because while that record was meandering and overlong and had some very questionable guest verses, the greatest strength of Jhené Aiko's album came in the writing, providing the complicated thematic context to add some gravitas to some of that spacey music, add that foundation of melancholy. And while Golden Hour is significantly shorter, the more listens I gave it, the more I found the lyrics to be Kacey Musgraves' greatest shortfall here. And yeah, it breaks my heart to say that, considering the layered wit that she brought on Same Trailer Different Park, and it's clear that she's still a great lyricist on a technical level. There's a naturalistic flow that makes this record go down impressively easy, and I respect the hell out of that. But I've always said if this sort of dreamy, meditative music doesn't go off into weirder or darker territory to either perplex the audience or ground itself, it winds up falling in this tranquil emotionality that's pleasant, but starts to run a little flat for me. I'm not denying that love songs like the title track or Velvet Elvis or Butterflies or Love is a Wild Thing, they've got their footing in real affection. But when you suck away so much of the sarcasm and lyrical flair that Kacey Musgraves pushed for this approach, the songs just come across and lacking some greater dimension in comparison to what she's capable of. Hell, I found myself gravitating to tunes that at least try to tap into some sort of deeper message or melancholy, from the breakup of Space Cowboy to the loneliness of Lonely Weekend, or the lingering feeling that the good moments won't last on Happy and Sad, or the acceptance of imperfections in a partner on Wonder Woman. But even then, the wordplay can't help but feel a little bit tepid by Kacey Musgraves standards. Yeah, I didn't mind her taking down the posturing of High Horse, but she's cut far deeper in the past on songs like Stupid or Step Off or even Biscuits. So look, I want to stress that this is indeed pretty damn good or even great pop country. I truly think once we get out of the whole hype cycle and the backlash inevitably to come, that it'll stand as an ephemeral but generally pretty damn beautiful and enjoyable album. But it's not close to her best work by any stretch, probably her weakest mainstream record, and it really does showcase a lot of questionable warning signs going forward. It's underwritten. Thematically, it feels scattered at best. There are some questionable production choices that could blend together better, and it's not nearly as original or genre-pushing as it's been marketed or hyped up. So let me say this. While I'm giving this an extremely light 8 out of 10, I'm not recommending this right out of the gate when there are plenty of women who have dropped or will be dropping more compelling or experimental country music just in this past couple of months and who will not get nearly the same attention. Starfire by Caitlin Smith, What It's Like to Fly Alone by Courtney Patton, Liberty by Lindy Ortega, and especially May Your Kindness Remain by Courtney Marie Andrews. Then, after all those, come back for Kacey Musgraves and Golden Hour. With an album like this, she's made it clear, high or not, she's not going anywhere. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. I'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. My voice is still kind of hoarse, I'm trying to take it easy. This is the only thing I've really said throughout most of the day at work, so I gotta respect that. But yeah, if you want to buy the record, links below, and I got the poll up there, so I'm curious where a lot of you guys fall on this, because I know a lot of people are saying this is her most accessible record to date, but I don't really think it's her best, and I hope that reflects that. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process, link to my Patreon is right over there, where recently I've done a shift over from a per video approach to a per month approach. So there's a lot more opportunities for you guys to get in on the whole process, and I'd be really grateful if you take a look, just hop on board. Where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. More details right over there. I'd be happy again to see you guys get involved. I also have the link to my schedule. It's on my Instagram. That's also down there in the description. But until then, I'm Mark. You're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.